Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Unified Podcast. It's another glorious day on the island. Nothing but blue skies.
It's been raining for the last couple of weeks.
So what we're going to do today is we're going to have a two-part series where you get to know a little bit more about myself and my brother Paulie. And we're going to share some of the work that we do and how it also relates into our joint venture with our retreat space. So today, I'm going to be more focused on Paulie, and I'm going to do a bit of interviewing for him. So, Paulie, you're going to share your story and what got you here to this point now. So, why don't you start us off at the beginning? To actually start off by telling everybody what it is that you do, and then start off at the beginning.
I'm a qualified holistic health and lifestyle coach. But my day-to-day profession, and you could say my passion and what I love the most, is to train with the body. My method is something that I've created and come up with, which is strength through length. Mm-hmm. That's what I've named my methodology. And you could say it started for very similar reasons why a lot of my clients come to see me. They're in pain or they've injured something. I remember when I was 13, I had a lot of injuries with my knees. I dislocated my knees various times. It happened actually when I was about 10, my first dislocation. And I remember Mom took me to the doctor and they were like, this isn't right. So my mum, sorry, a hair in my mouth. That's what happens when you've got long hair. And my mum took me to see a personal trainer when I was 13. Because she thought it would be a good idea to strengthen the knee. And that was my first introduction to training in the gym. And I really liked it. I liked the feeling, feeling strong. But I also started to see differences in my appearance. And, 13, 14-year-old having that kind of strength in the appearance, it's big. You're meeting girls, you're going out, or you're becoming an adult.
Okay, so your entry point was to just puff yourself up and
originally it was to help the knee, and it did help a bit, but I became addicted to the aesthetics of it. Yep. And I kept training on my own. So I left the gym with the trainer. She was cool, and I kept training on my own up until I was about 20, and through that point, the dislocations then became on both knees, and they became more frequent. I'd say at least twice a year, I would dislocate one or both of my knees. And at this time, I was playing a lot of soccer as well as basketball. And then I stopped basketball. I made the decision to stop basketball and concentrate on soccer. But the dislocations just kept happening. And I was still training in the gym. So I made the decision to stop soccer, and about this same time, I also decided to go traveling. You were also traveling,
right.
And I thought, okay, I'm going to go. You could say I kind of was running away from the pain.
You could also say that you were following your inspiring brother David to go live in the UK.
That was a big. I think that gave me the confidence to go. Then when I got to UK, after a bit of traveling, I decided to become a personal trainer with yourself. We did the course together. And I made the decision when I got the certification, I started training, that I was going to concentrate on developing my body to be, you could say, as lean and strong as possible. It didn't involve any mobility or any function. And I put that to the side.
Are you still dislocating your knees? Are you still having knee problems at this point when you were in
At
London?
that point, yeah. I wasn't, because I wasn't training outside of the gym. Like, I wasn't doing any sport.
Okay.
And I put it down to sport was the issue. That's what I interpreted. It's sport, and my knees isn't capable of playing sport.
Yeah, okay.
So I concentrated just on training, just pure strength and conditioning, because that's kind of what was working. It was what was developing my body to have the appearance where, you know, as you remember, my average body weight got up to, I was averaging about 100 kilos and I was lean. All year round, I was around 10% body fat. And my standard, you could say the standard squats, deadlifts, bench press, you know, those standard strength and conditioning lifts were all at a good standard. So my strategy for that appearance was working.
Yep.
And then I got to around 30 and I started to feel a sharp pain in my knee. And instead of changing my approach, I thought, I don't want to, lose my strength or lose my gains. So I'll lower my lifting standard. So what that basically means is instead of doing a heavy squat, I'll do a heavy leg press because I don't feel the pain when I leg press.
Yeah, okay.
So I can still train my strengths without so much focusing on the weaknesses or find another way around. And I thought that was good. And
So you found a new way to keep doing the same thing.
yes.
Okay.
And then the pain, the sharp pain just became a little bit more apparent. It's like it kept knocking on the door just a little bit more until I couldn't squat, like I said, but I couldn't squat anymore. I had to take it out. And then it became noticeable when I was walking up and down stairs. And I think a lot of personal trainers get to a point where they realize that their technique or what they're studying has a bit of a limit, but there's a bit of an ego that you're up against where to actually admit that, where, okay, what I've been doing now, I can just speak for myself, but I got to the point where I was like, okay, what I've built my life on, my career, my body, and like the last 13 years of my training wasn't working because my knee had this pain. I couldn't even sit in a Caesar. I couldn't sit on my legs without sharp pain. And I decided I needed a change. And that was really hard because it's like...
What was the moment when you decided you needed a change?
The moment when I couldn't walk up and down stairs.
Which staircase were you walking up? Were you like going, fuck this?
Well, my the gym that I worked at in London was underground.
Yeah.
And feeling that, just feeling a sharp pain, not being able to squat like I used to squat, or do the lifts that I had built myself up on. It was taking my awareness. I could see it. And around that same time, I also got to the next 10-year point in my life where I thought I needed a change in my overall life.
Yeah.
And that's when I left London.
Yeah.
And went backpacking. And then when I was backpacking around South America, but I spent most of my time here in Florianopolis actually, I started to explore different methodologies because it's like I'd given myself
training.
Yeah, I gave myself the space and the opportunity to explore. Mm-hmm. And it started off by, I liked Ido Portal. This is when Ido Portal's movement training was becoming more of a public thing.
Yeah.
And I really thought that was super cool. So I started to just muck around with that. And I met some friends here on the island that were yoga teachers. So I started to explore yoga.
What kind of training does Ido Portal?
He's known for...
What was the difference between Ido Portal? So you've gone from a traditional bodybuilding style lifting regimen from the gym and maximize that. Then you've come here and you started to explore Ido Portal. What was the difference between some of that as an entry level?
You could say for someone who's never heard of the movement method that he has, it's very hard to put a container on what he teaches. But if I had to just sum it up, it's a mix between mobility, There's some calisthenics, gymnastics, and animal movement. It's so much more than that. It's dance, it's spirituality, it's so much more. But if I had to put it into side containers for people to relate to, I would say mobility. And that was so new. I was like, trying to bend a brick.
Yeah.
I had built up a solid brick, a ripped brick. And I was still around that 100 kg. I was starting to come down. To put it into perspective, now I'm floating around 80, high 80s. And the yoga was good. It was the yoga and the mobility was a very nice contrast for me. It was a very nice change. And then I got back to Australia, and I found a Ido Patel gym, you could say. The trainer there, Tom, was a practitioner of the Ido Patel method. His gym is Praxis in Canberra. Awesome gym. And
Shout out.
Shout out to Tom. And that's where I kind of went a bit further into it. Like I actually had structure to the method, and I loved it. It was the first time I could do a muscle up. Really started just exploring parts of my body that you could say were just weak links, which I'll touch on more further. And I went deeper into that, and then I went traveling again. And then I came back and I thought, now's my chance to actually try something new. I didn't want to just solely fix on one thing. And I went
When
deep.
was that moment when you decided, okay, I've gotten enough from this, where I want to, from the Ido Portal style? So again, just to recap, we've gone from traditional bodybuilding, then exploring Ido Portal's gymnastic, dance, animalistic, everything movement patterns, new movement patterns. At what point did you go, all right, there's something, what's the next thing? Or I think I've got enough from this, I want to go into something a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I don't think I reached my limit to what Praxis has to offer. I don't think I was reached anywhere near my limit. What did it for me was I still had the pain in my knee.
So the knee pain has still remained this whole time.
It got better, it went away, and then it came back. And it
Still not getting it.
yeah, so my knee was still tapping on my door.
Pain teacher.
So yeah, the pain
Teacher
Paul
guiding
Check.
you, saying, hey, keep going.
Yeah, you're almost there, keep going.
Almost there, but we're still around.
So that's when I actually went further into yoga, and I chose yoga as my only form of training. And I went deeper into that, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I love yoga. I think it has so much to offer. And I went really deep into that, and got to the point within the yoga where I was starting to feel like weak, and I was missing my weightlifting, but I had this internal battle where I viewed weightlifting as the demon, the devil, and it's like, no, you're not that person anymore. You gave that part of your life up for something else. Like, you're a different person now. And it was an internal battle of not going back to weights and continuing yoga, but I liked yoga, but I felt weak. I'd gained a lot of flexibility, but I felt I'd given up my strength. So then I arrived at a new point where I thought, let's look for something new, the next kind of method in my journey. And this is when I found a few people, actually. I think his name's Lucas, I forgot his last
Lucas
name.
Hardy.
The Range of Strength.
Yeah, Lucas Hardy.
And he was a great mix between weightlifting and flexibility and mobility. And he really introduced me to this concept of strength through length. He calls it range strength. And through him and really digesting all his method, everything that I listened to all his podcasts, I went into his membership program. I just really went in. I really wanted to understand not just do the method or not just do a program. I really wanted to understand the method, like the methodology that he teaches, because this really is like a love and passion of mine. And then I started to find out who some of his teachers were, and I went into their programs. Emmett Lewis was one of his big teachers that he talks about, and Emmett Lewis is a acrobatic, is the word, who came from circus. His background was in circus. So he's called the splits wizard. So his is more very gymnastics, circus style of movements. And then there was another guy who I'm losing the name, but his thing is stretch therapy. And his was more softer because stretch therapy. And his approach was really this deep mindfulness connection with the body through stretching and gymnastics movements. And I went into all three, where it was, I still was getting the strength side of it through range of strength. I was getting this mindfulness kind of very intimate stretching into length through stretch therapy, and this gymnastics style through Emmett Lewis. And this process was a 3-year long.
So you're starting to synthesize all of these different teachers, taking little bits here, little bits here, little bits here, and bringing it all together. So it's becoming something more you.
Yeah, because exactly. For example, when I was doing the range of strength work, I loved it, absolutely loved it, but it still felt like it wasn't completely me, and it was a big part of me, but I was like, there's something more to this. There's more that I want to explore. And even ATG Ben Patrick, I forgot to mention him. Around that same time, he was becoming quite a big person in the scene through the Joe Rogan podcast, was when I first heard of him. And his thing was directly on knees. So when I started to explore his method, combined with everything else I was learning, I started to see this golden thread between all of it. Like, what joins them together? And I think what really helped me join them together was my strength and conditioning study and work that I had done when I was in London.
Full circle.
Yeah, because I had done Charles Poliquin's level 1, which is probably, he died about a year ago, but he was probably the #1 world's best strength and conditioning coach.
Was for a while, absolutely. I mean, he trained like multiple Canadian Olympic teams in different sports and everything like that, and lots of different strength athletes and everything. So if you haven't heard of Charles Poliquin, look him up. He's not hard to find.
Well, a lot of people have heard of like the German volume training, 10 by 10. That's Charles Poliquin.
Yeah.
And at that moment in my life in London, and the level of awareness that I had, I viewed his training as being like amazing for strength and conditioning, which it is, and for developing a big body. But I kind of didn't go deeper into the structural balance and the kind of like the method behind his programs. I just was stuck on the programs. And then after this kind of 6 years of exploring more movement training and mobility and flexibility, gymnastics, calisthenics, and all the yoga, all these different methodologies, I could start to see what Charles Poliquin was saying through that structural balance.
So you had new eyes.
Pardon?
You had new eyes.
Yeah, and as well as when I was 30 and I did my holistic health and lifestyle course through the Chek Institute, Paul Chek introduced me to a concept called primal pattern movements. And at first, I didn't shoo them off. I thought, that's interesting, cool. Didn't really go into them. And it was at this point where everything started to make sense. Well, at where I am now, I could join my dots back, and it started to make sense where I could say, all right, when I was younger, my training that I was doing wasn't structurally balanced and it wasn't functional. And the biggest indicator was I kept injuring myself.
Yeah, and your knees.
My knees, I had pain, I kept injuring myself, but I was ripped. So my training wasn't transferring over to my activity. If the training that you're doing isn't transferring over to your sport or to your activity, whether it be work or to your
Right,
day-to-day
yeah.
activities, then it's not functional.
But on the outside, it looks, you are the picture of what health and fitness and functionality should look like.
Yeah, I
what
look
we're
the
taught
part.
it looks like.
I definitely looked the part.
But yeah, he looks the part, but he doesn't act, he can't act the part through the body, through the mechanism that we're all admiring. It's a nice package externally, but internally, it's like getting a Ferrari without an engine, you know?
And it's hard for the Ferrari to come to terms to that. It's really, it's your ego. It's hard because, you know, you're looked at as being this trainer who knows it all. Who my clients were getting amazing results, and a lot of them looked up to me, and I was trying to hold that, and it was hard for me to come to terms with the fact that I didn't have all the answers, and my body was starting to break down or to show cracks.
Sounds like your knee was humbling you.
Yeah, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, and being able to connect the dots back to when I was younger through everything that I was learning over that 6-year period from 30 to now, 36, it was the best 6 years that's ever happened to me. But it was the most challenging in terms of I studied and learnt and just didn't stop going and going and going, and was like, okay, there's more, there's more, there's more, there's more. And there's always going to be more. And now I've kind of come to the point where I've got a methodology where I run off two main principles. And principle one is the fact that where there's a set of movement patterns which every single movement derives from. So if you were to write down on a piece of paper every single exercise you could think of, whether it's weightlifting or gymnastics, and you were to look at the root of that, and you would say, well, what's the common denominator between all these exercises? You would find a root. And Paul Chek introduced this to me, but the gymnastics allowed me to expand it, where the common denominator comes down to 8 key movements. You got the squat pattern, the lunge pattern, the fold pattern, like forward fold, back bend, so fold, the twist, the push, the pull, the run, the walk, or the hang. And when you look at these patterns, what I do is like, okay, can I, with my body weight, successfully perform these patterns? At that time, I could only do them with a weight. But when I did them body weight, for example, I couldn't sit in a resting squat without 150, 160 kilos on my back. So I didn't have the pattern in my body, and it was showing through my imbalances with the injuries.
So you're overdeveloping all these other parts and underdeveloping these other parts. So that means that when you put 150 kilos in your back, the overdeveloped parts take over and the underdeveloped parts stay underdeveloped.
So the imbalance is there, but it's hidden. Yeah. And then if you take those movement patterns and you extend them further, then you start to get into the concepts of ATG, his split squats, Lucas range for strength. A lot of his is the next level where you start to add weight to that range, to these movements. So you start to expand on those movement patterns. And then you take it a step further and you get into gymnastics movements. Gymnastics movements, at their very roots, are these these foundation movement patterns. As side splits, if you break that down one further, it's a horse stance, which is further strength, further flexibility. You bring that straight down further, it's a squat. Then the next part of my method was a structural balance. And this is the cake to it all. Without this, none of it has anything, no legs to stand on. Because the real essence to structural balance, it's within the name, structurally balanced. It's like, are you training from your toe all the way to your neck? I hadn't even ever explored training my feet. Like, I broke my big toe and all my balance went, but I never made the connection that everything, your whole grounding, your whole structure, everything, every step, every run, every move you make comes from your feet. So started training my feet. And then, am I training unilaterally? I was doing big squats, but I was never doing the split squats, training unilaterally. Then training front to back. You might train here, but are you training here? You might train your glutes, but are you training your hip flexors? So training the front and back to everything from here to here to here, all the way up. Training flexion, extension, rotation, just basically training your body in every capability and form that it has. Long range, short range, mid range. I mean, structural balance itself, if you were just to apply that to whatever style of training you do, it will magnify the results. And what I've been able to do through now this methodology is my knee isn't 100%, but it's 85 to 90%. But I'm able to now test myself to do advanced movements that I wouldn't have even dreamed of. Like being able to do a front splits, being able to do almost a side splits, being able to do a reverse Nordics. My knees would have broken. I wouldn't have been able to handle this.
Paul, not just your knees. I don't know if if my knees, if your knees at 90% can do a half splits, then my knees at 100% can't do a quarter splits. So I think your 90% is my 150%.
I'm
roughly.
I'm almost with my calves touching the ground on the side splits, which is a level 3 in the method. So what I've been able to do now is synthesize a method that is really structurally balancing my own body, but my client's body with leading them towards functional movement patterns so they can actually function within their day, within their activity, within their sport, within their work, and then expanding and growing this through expanding the flexibility and expanding the strength. And it's just growing their functionality within life. And I see this as really this is what longevity, functionality of the body, longevity, and not just body image. That's what I really want to push, because it's what's changed my life with my knees and how I relate to training. And yeah, I mean, I could keep going and going and going.
Well, just final thing before we finish up is just touch on how you bring this into our retreat space. Paul and I are on a retreat space together. How do you bring the functionality into the retreat space, some of the functional training, and where can people find you?
Yeah, a lot of what I bring to the retreat space before we arrive there, my part of the coaching is to really bring a new sense of awareness to the body and where it's out of alignment. And this might not necessarily be through training. It's through sleep, through nutrition, through how you're relating to your work, to your partner. So it's the balance of the body, because this will go on to, if your body's out of balance and it's stressed, this is what's gonna keep drawing you out of the experience when in the medicine. So how I bring this to the table before is to create balance and alignment within the body, and to bring newfound awareness, to introduce meditation. And then when we're at the retreat, especially after a ceremony and being seated in a position for 4 or 5 hours, the body can become quite dense and quite stiff and rigid. Mm-hmm. And I bring mobility exercises in to wake up the joints and to get the energy flowing again. So that's the main way how I use what I understand about the body and health, and how I have aligned this to the medicine work.
Awesome. And where can people find you if they want to learn more about your work and see demonstrations and things like that?
If you head to my socials, my Instagram is probably the best page to go to. It's just P_D'Ambrosio. And there I share a lot of things about... A lot of the material that I connect with is where I can actually learn from a post. So I'm trying to give as much information and as much easy digestible ways for you guys to understand how to not only heal your knee, your lower back and your shoulder, the key points that most people have, but how to perform and achieve some really cool exercises that they were like not even part of my awareness. I wouldn't even dreamed that I could do these things. So yeah, head to my Instagram.
And I can vouch for Paulie there. My strength and flexibility has gone through the roof since he's introduced me into some of these training methodologies, and I just can't go back to the way that I used to. So for what it's worth, I can also attest to the power of Paul's work. So you can find us on unified_TIH for the integrated human on our socials on Facebook and Instagram. But until next time, thanks for tuning in.